Tonight, we talk about Gnosticism. It's time to get uncanny. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's episode of This Uncanny Earth. We are going to be talking about Gnosticism, so I hope you guys are buckled in and ready for that. How is everybody doing tonight? How are you doing tonight, Spider?
Well, it's not that bad, actually. I mean, it's kind of noisy in my neighborhood, so the window's shut, so I'm not getting that nice, cool spring breeze like I wanted, so that makes me grumpy. But, you know,
it is a nice spring breeze.
Yeah, and that's why everybody's out, and that's why it's noisy, because everybody's enjoying it. So I can't really feel bad about that. I can't be like, you people trying to enjoy the spring. Heck with you. I can't do that. That's not nice. So
I got to ask you, what is your ideal temperature? Out of curiosity.
Probably like a high 60s, low 70s.
I can feel that.
Like, it's cool enough that during the nights you can kind of like get that cold breeze and be like, ooh, it's a little chilly, but it's not bad. Like, you like that little bit of like, ooh, nice little chilly bit. But
yes, it's
not so hot that you're just sitting there sweating and just like, oh, this is absolutely terrible. It feels like Texas in the 4th of July.
Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. For me, it'd have to be mid-70s. 70 to 75 with no humidity. Perfect. That's perfect weather to me. Not for everybody else, but I know for me, like, I really enjoy that. Here in Ohio, though, it's been like 50s and 60s, which I actually don't mind. I don't mind that slight chill. Like you said, I like the slight chill in the air. I know some people don't. Some people are like, I like it a little warmer.
Yeah. I mean, just put on a long sleeve and you're going to be in your shorts anyway, regardless.
But, that is true. That is true.
But, yeah, just put on long sleeves and for me, pair of pants, and everything's good. And it's a little chilly outside, but it's not like I don't have to put on a jacket to go outside as long as I'm not going to be out longer than like 45 minutes to a couple hours or something like that. If it gets to be like it's going to be a while, I'll put on a hoodie, and usually I'm still good. Not like the other day when we were out at that T-ball practice, and then it was cold.
Bro, that T-ball practice was not forgiving at all.
It wasn't that cold when we left, and then once we got there, it was just like, this is T-ball, time to get cold.
It rained yesterday because we had went to T-ball yesterday from a bawa, and it was a chill city there. Like, I swear, it was cold, man. And it was raining. I don't mind, like, so what day was it? I have a little film that I took of this that I should put on social media at some point. But there was a nice cloud cover we had. I think it was Tuesday, where it was the skies were dark, but it wasn't raining.
Yeah, it got real dark and it looked like it wanted to storm, but it just didn't. It was like, nope, no rain, just fooling you guys, just faking you out.
But I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised. But anyways, so the cloud cover turned into what looked like Jormungandr wrapping himself around the world. And I have it on video. I should post it at some point. And I was so comfortable. I was just chilling. And it was like everything was perfect. Unlike our next thing, at least to my co-host, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Dad Jokes.
It's time for Dad jokes. You guys might notice that was extra long because we've been having an issue with the opening theme, and I was just talking to Rob about it, like, behind the scenes. I'm letting you guys know because it's such a chronic thing and it irritates the crap out of me. Like, it'll just pause. Like, the track will just pause and then continue. So it sounds like I hit a pause button for like 3 seconds and then it was like, oh, forgot, and let it go. And it does that sometimes on the dad joke theme, and it just did it just now. Instead of the opening theme, it saved it for later. So, now I have to hear the joke and I have that. So there's 2 times that I'm going to be unhappy.
And I have 3 jokes. So you're about to be 5 times unhappy.
Well, great. That's just perfect. That's just great.
And this comes from our resident joke writer, Leah Carpenter, who sends these 3 amazing jokes that you're probably not going to like. The first one. If sweet dreams are made of cheese, who am I to disagree? There's that one.
That one's kind of been around a little bit, and it's
okay.
kind of ripped off. It's kind of ripped off.
Hey, first of all, don't worry about that.
No, that's a meme thief right there. I'm giving out 1 meme thievery demerit.
So, anyways, I forgot to tell you this. So the other day I was grilling hamburgers, right? And, as I like to do, I put ketchup on my hamburgers. I got a little bit on my finger, my eyes started itching. Well, I ended up getting ketchup in my eyes. Now I have hindsight. That was pretty tough. It was
What's
hard.
funny is that it was store brand and it wasn't even Heinz.
And finally, what group of people never get angry? Nomads.
Well, I guess it makes sense that I kind of stay at home. Because I get mad a lot. Especially after those.
I would love to. So I think what I'm going to do, like, if we ever get, when we get successful, not if, when, I want to pay, I don't even pay, I just want to go find a doctor to monitor your heart rate and your brain functions, obviously in a non-harmful way. And I want to see what happens when I tell those dad jokes. And then I want them to give you like a CAT scan or something to see how your brain functions when I tell dad jokes.
I mean, good luck though, because I've seen my cats and I don't think they can sit still to give me a scan.
That's facts. Leah says Craig is definitely not a nomad. Not at all.
No,
He's the most angry person I've ever met.
I am a very mad. I'm an all mad.
All mad.
Like an
all
almond.
mad all the time. It's the all mad
joy.
channel.
All mad joy. That's what it is. That's my.
Oh, look at that! You got a little dad joke yourself there, buddy boy.
I know it's a virus and it's slowly murdering me.
And I love it. Like, I cannot wait to attend your funeral and write a dad joke on your tombstone. I'm gonna pay to have it chiseled.
What I'll probably do is you'll probably try to tell one at the service, and I'll probably pop up with that last bit of like post because there's a little bit of life in the body still afterwards for growing the hair and nails, and every last bit of that will actually be focused into me like sitting up and looking at you and just being like, "What the," and then laying back down and being done with it.
I'll just be like, "Go back to sleep, old man." Everybody else will be mortified.
They let everybody in here these days.
Oh, hey, I got to say that to somebody the other day. So there is a cop that coaches one of the other teams, but I know him through a program that my son did for school, just like how to cross the street and not to talk to strangers, stuff like that. And good guy. And I was like, I walked up to him. He saw me, and I walked up to him. I was like, they just let anybody up in here, don't they? And he was like, what are you going to do? Typical dad moment, which was very amusing to me. I have to say, I love having those dad moments. Just seeing other dads be like, they just let anybody here, don't they? This guy.
Look who decided to show up.
Oh, they let you in here? Yes. I live for that now. I 100% live for that. Though, I have to be honest, I am not the New Balance sandal wearing by the grill person. Sandals, yes. Slides, really. Not sandals. Because I can't do the I can't do my foot trapped in the sandal. I want to be able to take them off at my leisure. And you can't do that with the straps. You got to pull it off. And with the slides, you just slide in, slide out. Slide in, slide out. It's a very methodical thing with me. I don't like to be covered. So, but I have the Adidas slides, and everybody knows those Adidas slides are the most legit things on the planet. But I digress.
I'm going to take your word for it.
It's just because I have knowledge of it. Or
I thought you were about to say it's just because I have 9 pairs of it.
I've got 2 solid pairs, 3 solid pairs actually.
That's close to 9.
Love them. It's a square root of 9. Yeah, that's right. We did that. This is one of those smart highbrow shows. So
highbrow.
I think they are uncomfy.
Well, I mean, there's one point in favor of that compared to the dad jokes, which are in the low hundreds.
Adidas slides are fantastic. But maybe she didn't mean Adidas slides, though. Maybe she meant the sandals with the straps on them. So, because slides are amazing, bro. I'm telling you. Slides are fantastic. I can wear them to take trash out. I can wear them to... Thank you. You should get a pair. You're grumpy and old, so they'd be
my shoes are all slip-ons, so it's basically the same thing. You just cover my whole foot.
Listen, bro. If you start wearing Velcro, I might have to end this friendship prematurely.
Nah. Even that's too much work. Even that's too much work. I got tired of tying the shoes and having them get untied all the time, so I was like, I don't want to do that. And Velcro's even another step of just like, they'll just get on Velcro. To heck with it. I just want to slip on the shoe and call it a day.
Holler at your boy.
Simplicity.
I'm not mad about that. I am not mad, and I highly respect it.
I like simple things in life these days. Slip on shoes.
You know what? Listen, you deserve it. All right? You deserve it. If anybody deserves it, it's 100%.
Hard living. Hard living.
Well, yeah, it's yeah. She said, I've told you my disdain for slides. So, well, that was this. This has been fantastic. I'm going to get out of here. You can talk about Gnosticism tonight. I'm good. I'm going to go. I'm going to put on my slides, put on some nice jazz music, and relax with my slides
guys,
on
it's
my
time
feet.
to get nasty. Oh, hey.
Hey. All right, everybody get out. Get out. I'm shutting it down. Everybody's fired. It's time to skedaddle.
That's for the other show. That's for the other show.
That's for the Uncanny After Dark, which, if you are a Patreon member, you get to listen to. And if you are not, you do not. So, there. In your face.
So I guess it's time we actually did this, huh?
Are we doing this thing?
We're doing the show now?
Are we doing it? I feel like we probably should.
We're 15 minutes in. Yeah, it's probably time.
Are we doing this?
Again?
All right, I guess we're doing this. So, what do you know about Gnosticism? Have you studied it ad nauseum like you did other stuff?
I did study it pretty closely. It's been a long time, though, because the bulk of most of my religious studies was quite a long time ago, to be honest. And then I studied some things, and then I kept up with the things that I ended up drifting towards, which is more the left-hand stuff and that kind of thing. So I'm more fluent in that these days than I am in the other things. But Gnosticism is pretty interesting. I mean, it's definitely kind of flipped some things on their heads. Like, the whole concept about the dual deity thing, how one of them is evil and one of them isn't. But, and you know, the way that they describe it's super interesting. Like, I don't think there is another religion or another spirituality, really, that's come about that's quite exactly like this since.
Not at all.
But a lot of the modern ones take some of their concepts from this. Even modern day Christianity and Catholicism and them take some of their concepts from Gnostic thought because it's kind of infectious. It's one of those things that certain parts of it really make a lot of sense, and other parts are kind of like, let me just sit down and try to figure out what substances you were taking when you wrote this.
What do you think they were taking?
Well, back then, I mean, who knows? I mean, They didn't have labels for stuff like we do now, so
Okay.
they probably had access to a lot of different things. There was, and this is a tangent. This is definitely a tangent. I don't want to get anybody
Yes,
riled up
we,
here.
we should we should probably start talking about the actual topic though.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
At some
So,
point. I mean, at some point. I don't want to detract you. If you got something to talk about, go ahead.
oh no, just a quick aside that some of the people, one of the things that people try to use to throw shade, I guess, on the
my
resurrection
gosh.
and things like that.
Did you
That's not what I meant. Like, I was trying to find a different term
just
for it, but
use
that's
that
what popped in.
nomenclature? Did you just
Yeah,
use that
because that's what
nomenclature
popped in
on the
there.
show?
I was trying to use something highbrow, and that's what came in, so I had to go low for it. But for the resurrection, how the stone rolled away and everything, one of the things
Yes.
that people have said to try to throw, not that, but to try to like pass it off
Diminish
as, oh,
it.
that didn't
Diminish
actually
it.
happen, was supposedly in that area. There's these mushrooms that grow outside that they're kind of like the mushrooms today that make people crazy, right? And make people like see visions and things. And so apparently Roman soldiers around that time period liked to eat these grave mushrooms and things like that. And so when the Roman soldiers verified, oh yeah, there's nobody in there, then one of the things they tried to use against that was like, oh, you guys were eating the mushrooms. You know, I don't know if there's any actual evidence for any of that. Maybe they like wrote that, oh yeah, we eat these mushrooms sometimes. But yeah, it's just one of those things that they use.
So, I have studied a little bit, probably more than you have, not in a disrespectful way.
Oh yeah, I would acknowledge that probably. Yep.
I have an actual copy of the Nag Hammadi library that I bought at Hobby Lobby. They just had them scrolls lying all about. That's
Right next to the Iraqi artifacts.
just right next to some Sumerian relics they just had sitting out next to their framing, obviously, you know. But I have a copy of the Nag Hammadi library by James M. Robinson, and we'll get into who he is a little bit, but I just want to start it off by saying that the term Gnostic itself relates to knowledge, especially esoteric, mystical knowledge, which also comes from the term gnosis, the Greek term meaning knowledge. And it's really a collection of religious ideals and systems that combined in the late 1st century AD that were among Jewish and early Christian sects. The history of the Nag Hammadi and Gnosticism was few and far between before 1945. Now, in 1945, in the town of Nag Hammadi, located in Upper Egypt, there was a local farmer named Muhammad al-Saman, which people called Muhammad Ali. He found 13 leather-bound papyrus codices in a sealed jar from a graveyard in the desert. Now, what he did was he took them to his home and set them next to the cooking fire. Now, some of you may think, well, you know,
Asking for
why
disaster.
did he do that? Well, his mother ends up taking some of the pages and using them as kindling for the fire.
Mm-hmm.
A little heartbreaking for someone like myself, much like the burning of the Library of Alexandria, but we won't get into that. And then it would go from Muhammad to an antiques dealer in Cairo by the name of Fokion J. Tanos. Now, the reason it did this is because Muhammad Ali had a blood feud with somebody else that had killed his father, supposedly killed his father. Well, Muhammad Ali and his brothers and some other people waited for this man to fall asleep beside the road, and then they went upon him and killed him. So Muhammad Ali knew that suspicion would go on them because everybody knew about it, and he decided to give these texts to somebody where it could do some good. Well, after the revolution of 1952, the texts are then handed over to the Coptic Museum in Cairo and declared national property. James M. Robinson, who we just talked about, an expert on religion, would gather a group of editors and translators together in 1966 to begin work on translating and compiling the Nag Hammadi into a translated edition in 1977 named the Nag Hammadi Library in English. The book was then revised in 1988. The copy that I have is, I believe, if I would check real quick, because I have it next to me for reasons. I have actually been reading through it as of late, too. So my copy is the 1988 edition. I got it off eBay for super cheap. And I've been going through it, and it's really interesting. And some concepts before we really dive into our conversation here that I want to get into real quick, and some definitions for you folks in case you're wondering, like, what does this mean? Because the thing with Gnosticism, the concept and idea is hidden knowledge. The whole thing, if I could sum it up, is attaining hidden knowledge and being able to go over into the next life with that hidden knowledge being the salvation of humanity. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the monad. Now, the monad is God, or the one. God is the high source of the pleroma, which is the totality of God's powers. The term comes from Pythagoras and Pythagoreans, who termed the first thing the monad, the second the dyad, and so forth. And in coming episodes, we're going to be discussing the Pythagorean cult. I am very fascinated with Pythagoras. Years ago when I was in high school, I was like, who's this dude? But after I started really getting into esoteric knowledge and reading the Quadrivium and the Nag Hammadi and other texts and things of that nature, I got into mathematics, which put me into Pythagoras, which put me into the Pythagorean cult. So we're going to be discussing that at a later date. Now, the next thing we're going to be talking about is the pleroma being the center of divine life. It is the place of divine life that is made up of spiritual beings whose life is much like the angels and where they reside, and beings like aeons and archons live. The lowest regions of the pleroma are closest to the darkness, which happens to be our mortal realm. The one thing you guys have to understand is our mortal shells are a hindrance in Gnosticism. They are a corruption. They are a wickedness. And we'll get into that a little bit more. Emanation, and that is the supreme light of consciousness that descends through a series of stages, gradations, worlds, or hypostasis. Wait, let me make sure I get this right. Hypostasis.
Yep.
Yeah. Eventually becoming more material and embodied. In time, it will return to the one, or the monad. Aeon. These are various emanations of the superior god or monad. Barbello is the first such example of an aeon. Now, this is not to be confused with the term eon, meaning an age, just to let you guys know. Sophia, this refers to the lowest emanation of God. Sophia is also Greek for wisdom. She also identifies with the anemia mundi, or the world soul. She is also the one who birthed the demiurge known as Yalbada. These words are kind of rough. Yalda Ba'oth. Now, the demiurge is the entity ignorant of God and or opposed to it. Other names the demiurge goes by are the Ahriman or Angramenu of Zoroastrianism, El Satan, and oddly enough, Yahweh. And we'll get to that here in a second. The demiurge created the physical universe and the physical aspect of humanity. The demiurge also created a group of beings known as archons to preside over the material realm and present obstacles to the soul to keep it from ascending. Gnosticism relies on the concept of treating the physical body like it is a negative, and so one looks to escape from it. Finally, archons. Archons are essentially servants of the demiurge, and the group known as Ophites position the existence of their master's corruption, and there's essentially 7 main archons, beginning with Ayada Baoth, who would then go on to create 6 others: Io, Sabaoth, Adanios, Elios, Astaphanos, and Horaios. So these act as the demiurge's underlings, if you will, much like Semyaza and the fallen ones that were under him. To get into our topics tonight, first we're going to discuss what I believe to be a very interesting aspect of Gnosticism, and that is dualism. Now, in Gnosticism, the concept of dualism refers to the notion that the world was divided into the material and then the spiritual realm. The created world that we live in, or matter itself, is evil. Now, Gnostics actually split God into 2 separate entities. So what we see in the Old and New Testament in Christianity is this. The God of the Old Testament is a vengeful, wrathful God. It's played out in many different scenarios, from wiping out entire civilizations, kingdoms, kings, children, all of that. And he shows his mercy through his son, Jesus Christ, who dies on the cross, who sort of brings man back together, back into the fold, if you will, because in Christianity, the belief that man and God were separated was given from Adam and Eve after eating the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Once their separation occurred, there was no way to get back by normal means, and it took a sacrifice because the Jews would sacrifice animals as a way to atone for their sins to God. Well, there needed to be an ultimate sacrifice. Thus, Christianity brought in the aspect of Christ to be that ultimate sacrifice. The Gnostics took it a little bit different. They view the Old Testament God as evil and wrathful, wicked, if you will. So that is why Yahweh is listed as one of the demiurges. But Christ was actually sent to usurp the ways of the old God so as to bring mankind back into the idea and the concept of spirituality in a spiritual world, not so much existing in the material plane. Now, my thoughts on this are thus. The idea of the Old Testament God being an evil and wicked God, it doesn't play right in my mind. And a lot of people will say, well, what about his treatment of these certain people? And he said that you couldn't do this and you couldn't eat shellfish. Well, what a lot of people do not understand is that the notion of that, of saying you can't eat shellfish or you can't have desires for this specific type of person or you can't do this, was meant to keep the population growing. Because remember, the Jews in the Old Testament did a lot of complaining and got into a lot of trouble in different regions. They wandered through the wilderness, and a lot of them complained, and God said, you know, you're not going to see the promised land because your children will see it, but because you have complained and not trusted me and not put faith in me, right, you will not live to see that. But he goes on to be very merciful and still gives their descendants the promised land and allows them to go in and remove giants from different lands and different places, which they talk about in the book of Numbers, Deuteronomy, later on, Joshua, all of that. And so what we see here in Christianity is this God that, and he says, I am the same today, tomorrow, and yesterday. I am the same. What he did was give that love over to Christians in the form of Jesus Christ. And so to me, having that would disrupt, I think, a natural order. And Gnosticism reminds me a lot of the self-flagellation Catholics of the, I wouldn't say Dark Age, but the medieval period. And Catholics like St. Ignatius of Loyola, who would whip his back when he had sinful thoughts or had sinful ideas in his head. And this was a common practice. So to me, in this idea of dualism, it just strikes me as odd because in Gnosticism, it's basically like you have to get out of your body, but you can't commit suicide to do it. So it's a weird catch-22 thing where, you know, you have to escape this mortal coil or this mortal shell because your shell itself is sinful and corrupt. But you can't do it by killing yourself. And the only way you can do it is through hidden knowledge. And this just seems to me, Gnosticism itself seems a lot to me like a good old boys club, if you will. Like we have this special knowledge, and religion will do this. Some religious beliefs will do this, where we have all of this special knowledge, or that only so many people can get into heaven. And to me, this seems a little off. Now, Spider, what are your thoughts on dualism and the idea that the Old Testament God was actually an evil God, and that the Christ was sent to come and sort of usurp that role and lead mankind, those who deserve it, into the realm of spirituality?
Well, it's an interesting reconciliation because, and I know a lot of modern people who a lot of modern Christians, and I don't want to point fingers at people and be like, this is you I'm talking about right now. There are a lot of people who claim to be members of Christianity for whatever denomination, and they still bring up like, oh, well, Leviticus says this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this. Well, the Gnostics were way ahead of you on some of that stuff because they knew that the New Testament, the whole point was to replace the old rules of the Old Testament. If you read it, that's what it says. Once you read from the Old into the New Testament tells you flat out near the beginning at most of the books, I'm sweeping away the old order, and I need you to do this and this and this. So instead of sticking to those like really close rules and regulations, it's like we're at a point in our society we don't need to do that anymore. But people don't ever listen to that so much. Like I said, people still quote Leviticus, they still quote some parts of Numbers, and they still quote certain things as these are rules that you have to live by. And then they conveniently forget certain things. Like popular memes like to say that Leviticus, they talk about the, not men lying with men, etc., etc., but they also say you're not supposed to have tattoos, and people who say one thing tend to have this and that, and they don't listen, like cherry pick. But for the Gnostics, I think it was a kind of reconciliation. I think it gave them more of a reason to discount the Old Testament. I think they felt like it was such a radical thing to say, okay, well, the Old Testament isn't applicable anymore. And I think they had to come up with a reason for themselves why. I think they were really invested in certain parts, and I think they had to say, you know what, this is why. There has to be a deeper meaning for it. It can't just be because the paradigm is changing. It can't just be because we're supposed to just be good people to each other from here on out. There has to be a reason why they said don't do what the old one says anymore. So they came up with this concept that the old God was a different God, and that God must have been a bad God. And it's interesting that they came about to that, because they were kind of ahead of their time in other things too. Like a lot of modern New Age things say, oh yeah, you're not who you are, you're your spirit and your inner light, and you're an energy being trapped in the physical world. And that seems like a kind of a radical thing to us these days, even now. Like it came about in like some of the renewed spirituality in the 70s and things like that, and it freaks people out a little bit. But nowadays you get that a lot. Nowadays you get that in a lot of your Sunday morning sermons, how, oh yeah, this body is just temporary. You're eventually going to go on to your reward in heaven, this and this and this. And the Gnostics were way ahead of that. But the way that they said it was by looking at everything that wasn't a being of light, a being of energy, a being of pure spirituality. They decided if it wasn't that, it was bad. And it was so bad that you actually had to punish it, which is why they punished themselves, and they did the flagellants and things like that. And it's interesting, because like I said, on the one hand, they're way ahead on certain avenues of spiritual thought that we're kind of at today that make a lot of sense. But then they reconciled it in ways that were, as far as what we know from what's been written, it's kind of savage, it's kind of brutal. But that's a problem too, because we don't know exactly what they thought necessarily, other than some of the most basic things we've recovered from them. Most of what we know about them are written by other people who believed other things. So it's kind of difficult to really know exactly how brutal they thought necessarily.
And that is a very good point, in that there was very few Gnostics. Now, there are communities of Gnostics that still exist to this day. However, they're so small and they don't allow outsiders. So you can't just go looking for them like, hey, can I join your movement? No. Mm-hmm. Because they keep it tight to the chest. They don't promote it. And honestly, I've never met a Gnostic person. Another person that's like, I believe in Gnosticism. I've known people to be agnostic, which isn't the same thing. Agnostics believe in something, but they don't believe in the gods like we do. They just believe in something.
They're undecided, basically.
Specific God they believe in. Yeah, they believe in there's something there, but they don't know what that something is, as to where Gnostics believe that there is something there, but they have to escape from this material realm. Mm-hmm. In Christianity, we have something known as salvation. believing in Christ, being saved. Most of you know this, but in Gnosticism, it's not the same. Hidden knowledge is actually the basis for salvation. Secret revelations will free the divine spark. Now, I have talked ad nauseum about my belief in the divine spark, which I believe every man, woman, child, pet, living thing, any living thing pretty much has any conscious living thing has a divine spark. Not everything has the conscious, like earthworms and stuff. They don't really have that consciousness of being able to differentiate, but some pets do. Monkeys, things like that, higher conscious beings, if you will. And so to me, that divine spark, especially in human beings, more so in human beings, because we can talk, we can think, we can act, we do it independently of our notions of survival. We do things out of survival mode, but we also do things that aren't for us to survive, right? You eating a 2-pound bag of Cheetos isn't helping you survive, but you're making that decision to do it. Or you drinking that fifth of whatever isn't helping you to survive. In fact, it's actually killing you. But, excuse me, I digress. We have a different consciousness than most things. And so we carry that divine spark in us, in all of us, in everybody, all human beings. Gnosticism, excuse me, Gnosticism believes a little different. They believe that there are people who are people, right? And then there are beasts. Hitler, Stalin, people like that. They're beasts. They're not human beings, per se. They're just animals by nature. And they don't have that divine spark in them. So they classify them as such. Now, what happens is, with having these secret revelations, it allows humans to return to the divine realm of light. Gnostics would actually divide Christians into two categories, carnal being the inferior and spiritual being the superior. Now, obviously, I don't really have to tell you this, but I'm going to. Only the superior, divinely enlightened persons could actually obtain true salvation, but only if they could comprehend the most secret teachings, which, if you're in this position, you probably could. So what we're seeing here is less salvation through an intermediary like Jesus Christ, and more of a salvation through one's own actions, which essentially contradicts Christian teachings in a way. Because
it's a very left-handed viewpoint, to be honest.
Yes,
because
very much no man comes into the Father but through me, i.e., believing in Christ, believing He died for your sins. This is a viewpoint of I can attain that secret knowledge, but this is the snobby part of it, only if I am chosen to do this. Gnosticism is like a secret club with secret handshakes and secret initiations, and the only people who get in are people who are selected to get in. And that is my main problem with Gnosticism as a whole. Like, only certain people get this secret wisdom. Okay. So salvation in this aspect grants also kind of a contradictory aspect to humanity. If humanity is actually flawed in this regard of matter being corrupt, it would be darn near impossible to become divinely enlightened as a human being, because if your shell is corrupt, right, your mind isn't going to be divine. So this reminds me almost of a cultist-esque ideology. What do you think, Spider?
It is, and that's a lot of the reasons why it was declared a heresy back however long ago when they tried to wipe it out. It's because there were some competing schools of thought. Like, one of the schools of thought was that even though you're supposed to deny your physical, like, wants, like, desires of the flesh, which you're not supposed to have gluttony, you're not supposed to have lust, you're not supposed to do that, you're still supposed to consider the body as a temple. The body was still supposed to be a sacred space, which is why you were supposed to take care of it. That's why they said, Don't lust after things because you don't want to get diseases. Don't eat these other things. Don't eat too much. Don't do this. Don't do this because you have to keep your body healthy and whole and whatever. Whereas the Gnostics were like, nah, the body's trash. The body is just garbage. We're stuck here in this garbage pile of a whatever, and we don't need to take care of that. All we got to do is focus on our mind. And the problem with that is, if you neglect a lot of your body's basic needs because you view it as pointless, that can cause a lot of brain problems, like nutrition deficiencies, all this other kind of stuff that we know now. And maybe at the time they didn't really know that. They didn't know that. They didn't think about that. They didn't care. They were just like, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't need to take care of any of this. Heck with it. I'm going to focus completely on just my mind and whatever. And in some cultures, we can kind of see that working. Like in Tibet, you have the Tibetan monks, and they're very, they don't have a lot of wants. They don't have a lot of needs. They do the basics to keep up, but they also make sure that they stay healthy. They do the fasting and they do all these things, but they don't do it at the detriment of their body. Whereas the Gnostics, the way it sounds, again, we don't have direct information about it. We have to kind of make guesses about it. But the way it sounds is, again, they're just like, no, this body's trash. I don't care about this body at all. I'm going to run it completely into the ground as long as my mind is still going strong and I'm still able to attain this gnosis. I'm gonna do it. And the crazy thing is, you had no way of knowing if you were going to be picked to receive that gnosis at all. Like, you could put your body through all this punishment and all this abuse and ignorance, and just, you might not even make salvation. You might be passed over. Just because. No particular reason. Just you didn't get picked. So there's a lot of contradiction, and there's a lot of things that were kind of backwards in it. And that's one of the reasons they got persecuted. And that's one of the reasons why the church was like, nah, can't do that. Can't do that. You guys got to go away. And who knows? Maybe they were a bit more enlightened than we're giving them credit for, but we just don't have enough source material. We got the Nag Hammadi, we got some other things, but again, most of what we know is written by other people from the outside. And that's a shame.
And that's a good point, because we're on the outside trying to look in. Mm-hmm. And we can't. Have you ever met a person that, besides me, have you ever met a person that's ever brought up Gnosticism ever, besides me?
Only a few people online, and nobody that I've met in person. Because most people don't really get into it. Like, if you know one online, right, it could be just because you've studied a vast array of things, like I have, or like you have, and whatever. It's not necessarily like, oh, I've spent an actual particular amount of time on this exact subject because this particular subject fascinates me. It's all kind of in a general knowledge sort of way. And even people today who say, oh yeah, we believe in Gnosticism, we're this and that, and they're very secretive about it, we don't really know if they're really on the right track or not, because they won't let anybody in. Like, right. They won't talk to anybody about it. They're like, yeah, that's what we believe, but no, we're not going to tell you about it. So it's like, well, how do we know? And it's just a shame. Like, I would love to know more. I would love to know if maybe we're completely off base, and maybe they weren't all that bad, and all the bad parts are projected from ancient church teachings from the Catholics and the Inquisition, or maybe they were even worse. Maybe they were absolutely brutal, just terribly fetishistic kind of people, and I don't know. I would love to know either way, but I don't think we're ever going to, unfortunately.
Quick shout out to my guy Zach. He says, hey guys, hope you guys are having a great night. Thank you, Zach. We appreciate you, bro. Good dude. So the only person I've ever met that knew a little bit of Gnosticism, right, was Wikos, who's not here. I don't know what he's doing, but he usually shows up on Friday nights, but he's like, and I watch, that'll bring him in. But this is when I was working at Sears, and I would listen to Bart Ehrman's Lost Christianities, which talks in depth about Gnosticism. That's where I first learned about Gnosticism was through him. And he would talk about the Gospel of Truth and the Gospel of Mary, all these Gnostic texts and Marcions and Ebionites and all these groups that had this ideology. And I remember him saying, yeah, there's a belief system that paints the Old Testament God as evil. And I was like, really? But he's the only other person. I don't even think me and you have had a conversation about Gnosticism. I'm not saying you don't know about it, but it's just something that just never really comes up. It's never
No,
something
because
that
you don't just go up to someone and be like, "Hey, so we've been talking about this. What do you think about Gnosticism?" And
what do you
like,
think about the play Roma,
yeah, I mean, I've
bro?
never really talked about it with anybody particularly, unless
No.
you've brought it up a few times because you got super interested, like you were super interested,
Yeah,
and
100%.
that's how we started talking about it. I knew about it, but I wasn't going to just go up to most people unless they talked about it first. And maybe that's what the other part of the problem is. Maybe most people who know about it aren't talking about it because they're waiting for us to talk about it first.
Maybe all of a sudden when we go out to places, I'm like, guys, to play Roma. You guys
We
know
don't
what to play
talk about the Gnostics unless the Gnostics talk about it first. Oh, okay.
Roma. So all of a sudden we start getting calls from Gnostics and been like, hey, buddies, you
Hey
guys want to talk about
guys,
Gnosticism?
thanks for giving
There's
me a platform.
But there's been no real revival of Gnosticism. There's been no real Gnostic movement per se. We had a spiritualism movement, then we had another one in the 90s that was the New Age movement, but it was in the same vein. But
Mm.
nobody has brought a Gnostic movement back from the ether. And I think because Gnosticism as a whole is a bit absurd in a way, in my opinion, mind you. So if
Mm.
Gnostics out there, you want to get mad, fire off your emails, thisuncanny@gmail.com. Feel free. If I'm wrong, correct me. I am not upset about that. I love religion. I love to study religion. But to me, it seems like Gnosticism is a belief set that is so hard to maintain, right? Especially in this day and age. I don't think unless you lived in a country where you did not have to experience first world issues. So let's say parts of Africa, let's say parts of the Middle East, where you could sort of block yourself off from society. Gnosticism itself is a dead belief system. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean that with everything going on, with humanity being who humanity actually is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can uphold the ideologies that it would take to be a Gnostic. And I also think, too, that people that would run around saying, I'm Gnostic, and you know about Gnosticism, you know that they're basically being snobs, saying, I have this secret knowledge, you don't. I get to move on to the spiritual realm where I'm going to be divinely holy, and you're going to be with Yada by Oath, somewhere wherever Yada by Oath goes, and his archons, and this, that, and the third. And so to me, it just seems like something that it's very interesting to study, and I'm very fascinated with the ideologies located within the Nag Hammadi. And there is some really excellent teachings.
Mm.
There is really some good teachings inside of this book. But anytime I've noticed where somebody says, well, in order to be this, you have to have hidden knowledge, and nobody else can have it. I've got it. You can't have it. It
Mm-hmm.
just seems like a way to hoard power and create a pyramid sort of power structure. And once again, I'm only going off what I have read, what I have studied. I might be 100% wrong. There might be Gnostics that lived that were nothing like that, that tried to teach people the secret knowledge they didn't want to learn, because some people are like that. They don't want to learn. I've met people
Mm-hmm.
that want nothing to do with religion, and they aren't atheists. They just don't want to be part of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the Gnostic ideology, is that, we don't want to be part of religion. Okay. I understand that. But at the same time, it's like, you can't just call up a Gnostic. I can't be like, let me just call the Gnostic hotline. Gnostic hotline, this is Jim. How may I serve you today? What gnosis do you need today? And that's the thing about Gnosticism. It is an excellent, excellent study into humanity's way of thinking in terms of religious beliefs and ideologies. But at the same time, I do not think that it is a compatible belief system in the time that we live in. That's me.
And there's a lot of good points in there, and it's just one of those mysteries, I think, that had a lot of good points. Like, the gnosis concept has been co-opted by a lot of other spiritualities after the fact. because we do realize on some level that there is hidden knowledge out there. But the issue is that like you and I don't believe that stuff like that should be kept to an elite. It shouldn't be saved just for people who believe that, oh, well, I'm the person who deserves this secret knowledge. We kind of believe that, hey, this secret knowledge should go to everyone. And then you get into the philosophical thing where, well, what if you give it to somebody and they use it for evil? Well, that's just the risk you take. Because hopefully the amount of people who are going to use it for good are going to outweigh those other people. It's just knowledge is important. Everybody should have more knowledge. Knowledge should be free. And you should be able to pick and choose what knowledge you know and what knowledge you don't, as long as, again, you're not going to use it for purposes that are going to be harmful to everybody. And so... Yes. It's a great concept, and people have taken that concept while leaving all the other stuff behind. And I just wish I knew what the actual core was without having to hear it filtered from 2 or 3 other writers somewhere along the way. And maybe someday we'll dig up something that in some ruins somewhere that they tried to suppress or they tried to burn down back in the Middle Ages, we'll find some text or some stone or something that says something definitive. But maybe we won't. Maybe it'll always be one of those things that we're just going to have to guess at. And I think the best we can do is just take the better concepts out of it, which again is the Gnosis idea of just trying to learn as much as you can and just take that for what it is.
And yeah, that's it, man. Like, I agree with you 100%. It's, like I said, it's a beautiful thing to study and learn from and take aspects from and model your life to some of these aspects. Because there's a lot of knowledge in this book. Mm-hmm. I have cracked a couple of the books, and it's intense. It is seriously intense. Mm-hmm. I'll read you guys a quick passage from the Exegesis on the Soul. And this comes from the book of the same name. And the Expository Treatise on the Soul. I'll give you a paragraph. Wise men of old gave the soul a feminine name. Indeed, she is female in her nature as well. She even has her womb. As long as she was alone with the Father, she was virgin and in form androgynous. But when she fell down into a body and came to this life, then she fell into the hands of many robbers. And the wanton creatures passed her from one to another and ... because translation, her. Some made use of her by force, while others did so by seducing her with a gift. In short, they defiled her, and she ... her virginity. Now, what that may sound like to some people is a case of assault, sexual assault. But it actually is meaning wisdom. The wisdom was the thing they defiled. And that's what they are talking about, wisdom. And that's the thing about Gnosticism. They make it so parable-esque, right? Because the New Testament, what Christ spoke in, is parables. We all know about the man who toils and buries his money, right? Mm-hmm. Didn't invest it, didn't do anything with it. Well, there's a meaning behind that. Same concept here. It's wisdom. They defile wisdom. They use it for their own gains. They do this with it. They do that with it. So it's like they mimic a lot of the Christian Bible itself, but on the same token, they throw things in like Sophia, which is essentially wisdom, and then they throw the demiurge, and then they throw in that the Old Testament God was corrupt and this New Testament was different. And it's all of these things that I think what happened, to be honest, is they have pulled from different ideologies, and they just said, let's throw it all together and let's put it in one thing. Let's throw it in one thing. And like you said, it could have been people eating mushrooms or people being high. You know, like, we can't rule these things out because these things did happen. I mean, people in the 1900s drank Dr. So-and-so's miracle cure, and it was really just sativa, alcohol, morphine, and cocaine. So you mean to tell me somebody getting hyped up on that and then writing something? Let me get hyped on that. Let me write something. I mean,
even today, things like psilocybin mushrooms and things are getting kind of a
Yes.
resurgence. People are getting more into that, and there's more people saying, "Oh yeah, I had these vision quests, and they really opened up my mind about a lot of things." And a lot of them have actually been relatively stable people. Like when you first think about stuff like that, you think, "Oh, this person's going to be crazy. They've been on this thing, and it drives them crazy." But there's a lot of smart, intelligent, stable, regular people who are doing these things nowadays, and they're feeling better about their lives, and it's just interesting. It's super interesting.
Yes. And it has been said that microdosing psychedelics actually is good for writing brains, like CPTSD, ADHD, things like that. It actually writes the chemicals in your brain and sort of makes you feel normal, albeit seeing a little bit of things here and there, but it actually makes you feel normal, which could have been the same basic concept. They could have been eating mushrooms off of cow manure. Things like that. Like you said, psilocybin and peyote and vision quests and all these things
Yeah.
could account for that. The oracle at Delphi was said to inhale these fumes that made her see the future and things like that.
And the
Who's to say
supposed
this?
cave that she
Yes.
was in was supposedly volcanic gases and things like that.
Yes. And who's to say this isn't the same concept?
Yeah.
We can't for sure say that it wasn't. We can't for sure say that it was. And that's the thing behind it. But I definitely recommend people going out, read the Nag Hammadi, make Gnosticism a bigger, broader topic to study that people can get out there and get their hands in it, and people can put things together. I think as long as we keep things like this hidden, you see what I did there, people aren't going to come for it. They're going to say, "Oh, well, that sounds snobbish," and it does. I was reading like, "Wow, you guys sound like you're very snobbish about your ideologies and beliefs. Like you only want so many people." And I believe Jehovah's Witnesses, they have like a specific number of people that are going to heaven, and I think it was like
yeah, it's very specific.
13 or 30,000. I forget the exact number itself, but it wasn't as many people as there are on Earth. And I always thought to myself, that's kind of snobbish. Like, and that I think that's a problem I have with a lot of religious beliefs, that only so many people can go to heaven, and people that are believers, quote unquote, they will throw that in your face. I've heard Christian people that I know, that I've met, tell people they're going to hell. And I'm like, that's not exactly Christ-like whatsoever. You're basically doing the same thing they're doing. But you're doing
Especially
it worse
since
because
we
you know.
don't know. Like, we obviously don't have the knowledge that a deity has. We obviously
Facts.
don't know who's going where. It's a big, huge assumption. And, maybe you don't want to make that assumption, because maybe the next finger is going to be pointed at you and be like, "Oh, well, you told all these people wrong. That's technically lying. That's a sin. Now you're not going." So,
Exactly.
you got to watch what you're doing.
And I agree 100%. Anyways, everybody, thank you for stopping by tonight to This Uncanny Earth. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we love each and every one of you. And I hope that in the future we can continue to discuss religion with a open mind and not so much bias. If you are a Patreon donor over at This Uncanny Earth on Patreon, you get to hear our talk about religion and if we think it hinders or helps a society. You don't want to miss that. So if I were you, I'd kind of skedaddle on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/This Uncanny Earth. Sign up today. Get in on this. We got them uploaded. Our 200th episode, we're going to start releasing them. We're banking. I'm looking into banking at least 10 to 20. Then each week I'm going to upload an episode for you guys. So you guys get a little bit more amazing content from us. I'm sorry the Patreon hasn't been as good as I was hoping. It's been a lot for us. It's been a lot. It's a two-man operation. We don't have anybody else helping us in terms of audio, in terms of subject. It's basically us, and that's it. So we are, I know. There's no excuse. It is no excuse. We're going to do better. We've got 2 episodes banked. Our first was, I'm trying to remember. Oh, if Egypt should be a little bit more lax on who they allow to explore in their country. And our second, does religion hinder or hamper a society? You don't want to miss it. It was a great conversation. If you got to get on this, I'm telling you guys, you got to get on this. Anyways, guys, we're going to be bringing you more and more from this Uncanny Earth, and I hope you guys love and appreciate it. As always, next week, I guess I was going to go into it. We're going to be talking about spirit photography, and what people believe about cameras, and post-mortem photography. You're not going to miss that. That was brought up by my good buddy Deadpool Head H88888. Check him out on Twitch. Good dude. Shouts out to my guy. You guys are going to check that out. Anyways, guys, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks next week.